Hey, what's up? So we're going to talk about how to go about using a guitar, particularly electric guitar, to handle things like closing music and offering talk. And I'll show you two different approaches in this one video on how I go about it, because we're talking about two different sections, offering talk versus closing music. Both of these are pretty commonly done with piano, so I'm going to show you how I've adapted it over to doing it efficiently and effectively for the guitar, so that one, you can play for a long time without being exhausted, and two, so that it can be effective and move in a moment. So let me show you the offering talk first. Now, before we get started, let me show you some settings. Let me switch over to the screen here. And you can see the settings that I'm using here on this plugin. This is a Mesa Boogie Mark II C Plus from Neural DSP. So nothing too particularly fancy. I got this plugin on sale for like $50. You can use similar settings in just about anything that you want with any amp that you want. The real important thing here to know is that this is a clean channel setup, and there's a couple things that I'm doing. On the front end, I've got just a little bit of overdrive, as you can see. As far as your speakers are concerned, it's totally, again, discretionary if you're using a combo or something like this. It's a stack. As far as EQ goes, it's pretty flat across the board. I will say that generally with guitar, I try to do anything. I will pull 4K down just a pinch if the option's available. And then here's where the real bread and butter is at this point. So I can take something like this, which is the delay and the reverb. That's the sweet spot, and you want your delay in front of your reverb. And so as you can see here, I'm using a stereo delay with a quarter note and an eighth note. The mix is not super aggressively high, and the reverb, the mix is a little higher, but it's not too bad. You're using a little bit of filtering on both particular units, and then the decay on the reverb is pretty long, so it's not actually shutting it out, and there's a little bit of pre-delay on that reverb, and you do that so as to not have the reverb end up washing out the details. So this is a pretty good idea of what you can try to set up. We're not using anything that is stereo, so it's not a big deal if you don't have like a stereo delay or anything like that. So let's get into talking more specifically about like what this is going to sound like. So what we'll do is watch my guitar here, and you'll be able to get a pretty good picture of this. So this is what an offering talk will look like. Generally speaking, I'm going to take whatever the last song was and just play chords to it. But you don't have to, but I'll show you a very simple thing to do that kind of gives you a ballpark idea. And I'll just do this using a G-shaped pattern. Now let me disclaim first that I use a 7-string guitar. Please ignore this bottom string, and we'll detail out what the chords are here so that you can see it, and then just do some things. So this pattern I'm going to do right now for offering talk is just a G, C, E minor, and then we'll go back to a C, and then G. So really simple, and it's supposed to be, but we're not going to do the shapes the way that you normally would. Rather than doing these big G shapes like this, we're going to switch over to just using our third finger on the G note, and don't even worry about the high string. And then we just lay our finger so that the A string never gets plucked. So whenever we play a G chord, I just don't bother with the A string. I think it sounds terrible. And it will drone out the chord, especially when you're using reverb. So when you get done, it should sound like this. Or, so I'll leave that B note open, so the B string's open, and then it just requires that one just ring finger on the G. Now, what I'll do is when I go to that C chord, I'll actually make it more like a C2, and I'll put the E in there on the D string, but so kind of like this. Then we'll go to the E minor. And so now I can use the C note on the B string, first fret, so that I can add a little flair. Now, you just literally arpeggiate the chord. So the chords are basically going to go. But what I want to do is I want those chords to have a little bit more flair, and you kind of like don't just make the tempo rigid, like take that tempo and allow it to breathe. And so as you can see through like the C chords and the E minor shapes, so those C shapes, E minor shapes, you notice that the only thing that changes with my fingers is the third finger's employed for the C and my first finger's employed for the E minor, and that's it. There's nothing else that's involved with it. And then once I go from my C to the G, I just literally lift the second finger off of that E note and just go to the G with that one finger, just like this. So altogether, so there's not a whole lot of movement there, and that allows you a lot of freedom in being able to sit there and just do this for a long time. And so you really overall never stress out. Now, for the offering talk, I use the same key, all right? But what I do is I can't remember if I said this, I tune my guitar differently. So whatever you do, don't think that you're doing something wrong if you hear pitch differences. When I do this, I'm in the key of F. But of course, it's only the key of F because I'm tuned to concert pitch, B flat. All right. So when I do offering talk, I do it a little bit different. Okay. So when I do the offering talk, what I'm doing is I'm literally taking that E minor and I move it up here. And so let's talk a little bit about these chords here. So I'm going to leave the D string open or mute it. And then the G is open the entire time. I never put a finger on it at all. And then on the high string, which for me is the B, none of this that we're doing today that we're learning is going to employ the high E string. And that's really important to note because a lot of times people want to try to do something on it. And you certainly can. You can make this more complex as it goes on and as you get more comfortable with it. But for today, we're only going to use basically these four centralized strings. So the first finger is going to hinge on the 7th fret for this, and your third finger will hinge on the 8th fret of the B string, or second string. So 7 and then 8. If you're looking for a pitch reference to verify the correct placement, it'll be here. Okay, so that's what it should sound like when those two fingers are in the correct place. So here's essentially what we've got. Now we're going to take the first finger and slide it down to the 5th fret. And the pinky is going to take the place of the 3rd finger, but it's going to be on the 7th fret. Again, the D string will be, you can play the D string here. As you can see, when you do that, you get an interesting kind of a thing from the first chord. So the 7 and the 8. It's not terrible. So you can see kind of that movement that's happening there. We're doing the 7th fret-wise, starting on the 5th string, 7, open, open, and then 3rd finger's on 8. All right, now we're going to slide that down so that it's 5, open, open, 7. All right, now this is the shape. This shape right here, we're going to be able to just sling this all around. Actually, both of these shapes can be completely slung all over the place, but it specifically is this one that has the most placements. Let me show you what I mean. Let's move it, that same shape, up to fret 10. Let's move it down to fret 3. So as you can see, it's very, very, very simple. We're not doing anything overly elaborate or anything super crazy. We can also think of it in terms of octaves. So we could take what we did on 3 and move it up to 15. Now, I will say I usually interchange the pinky for the 3rd finger when I go up here, just because it gets a little crampy. But you can do it up here as well. So as you can see here, all I'm doing is I'm taking that 3rd, so I'm going from the 3rd position right here, or excuse me, yeah, 3rd position, frets 3, 0, 0, 5, slide it up to 5, 0, 0, 7, slide it up to 7, 0, 0, 8, and then 10, 0, 0, 12. And again, that's starting on the 5th string. So if you're on a 6-string guitar, that is string 5. All right, I know I'm using a 7-string, and that can be a little confusing, but that is what I'm doing here, okay? So please don't be confused. But essentially all I do is I'll go through and just start out by picking these notes, and I'll start like this. I'll always take the guitar. I still have it adjusted in my ears during the church service. I'll start at the volume being null. In other words, it's the volume on my guitar is all the way off. Now what I'll do is I'll strum the first chord that I'm looking to have. Start turning it up. And you adjust it to the level that you need it to be, and don't worry about having the volume all the way up, because that's not as important. What's important is that you can at least hear it and it's giving you results. So in this case, let me show you an example that I may start with. So I'm going to use 2 chords that involve the same shape as our E minor one. So 7, 0, 0, 8. Then we're going to do the next shape. So 5, 0, 0, 7. And then we're going to do the next shape, which is 2, 0, 0, 3. So it's the same exact shape layout in the chord as the first one was. But now what we're going to do is move from that to the 3, 0, 0, 5. And I'll just sit there and rotate these out just like this. So here's an example from start to finish of how that may look. So something like that. Now, if I wanted to get more elaborate with it, there are certain places I can add just an open note on the E string and an open note on the B string. So strings 1 and 2. Let me demonstrate. So as you can see, there's a couple little extra things I've done there. And what I'm doing for that extra little bit is I'm literally taking from, let me show you the possibilities with this, starting at fret 2 all the way up the neck. All right. So the first one is going to be 2003. 2003. The next one is 3005. The next one is 5007. The next one is 7008. The next one is 90010. This one's going to sound slightly goofy, but it works in transition. The next one will be 100012. Then the next one's going to be 120013. Then we'll do 140015. You probably noticed at this point now we're entering the octaves of where we started. 150017. 170019. 190020. Pretty cool, right? So this, and there's one higher you can go, but it gets a little and not everybody's gonna have fret 23. So I hope this has been informative, and I hope this kind of helps to steer you in a direction to using a guitar to be able to accomplish a effective closing and an effective offering talk behind your pastors. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments. I'm happy to elaborate on anything extra that may be done. And of course, there's a lot of different things that we can do. And I'm going to show you next in the next video how to do this for 7 strings.